Alright, here we are. It's another episode. Feeling good. Doing great today. Even though the weather here in lovely Ohio is really bizarre lately. Weather, that'll be one that I'll do in the near future. Weather. I don't know. I have a feeling that if I get into that, people are going to be kind of grumpy, because then they might be like, well, why don't you talking about climate change and this and that? And then people will have a lot of different opinions about all that. And, we don't really do that here. We have opinions. We just don't get into the grouchy ones. So, what's on tap for this episode? It is books. That's right. It's books. Let's talk about this. Now, I like books. I like books. Books are great. Books are fantastic. I have liked books for as long as I can remember. As a kid, I was a big reader. I was reading 400 or 500 page novels as an elementary schooler. And then not too long after that, I was getting into like 1,000 page novels and things. I'm not saying that to be like, I was super smart as a kid. I'm just saying that because I was so into reading and things. And I ended up reading a lot more grown-up books than I probably should have at that age. But, it's okay. Now, there's a cat in my house, by the way. You're going to hear her probably going, meow, because we brought her in last year, and she was wild. And now that the weather's starting to warm up mostly, she's like, okay, I can go back outside now. I want to be feral cat again. And she's upset. She's upset about it. But, anyway. Books. Yeah, when I was in elementary school, I was reading the novel Jurassic Park. Not just like one time either. I had a record. I read it, and I was proud of this fact, because I enjoyed the book so much. I was proud of this fact. I read it like 8 times in a month. And that was a pretty hefty book. It wasn't a little book. And that got me started on Michael Crichton books, and I branched out to other things that he had written, like Andromeda Strain and Sphere. Sphere is one of my personal favorites as well. And Congo and all those. His books are always better than the movies. Always better than the movies. The first Jurassic Park is really the only one based off of his books that's really worth watching. Jurassic Park 2 Lost World was half based on the book and half based on something else, and it fell apart completely. And then all the other ones after that aren't based on anything that he actually wrote. They're based off of script writers and things from other people. So, but yeah, the books are always better than the movies. But yeah, books. I read a ton of books. I read Lord of the Rings books as a kid. I read The Silmarillion as a kid, which is a pretty thick, a pretty dry book for a kid. But it was in my elementary school library, and I don't think too many other people would read it, so I ended up checking it out a bunch and reading it a lot. What else? I mean, there's a lot of books out there. A lot of the books that I read are fiction, and a lot of books that a lot of people read are fiction, but there are also a lot of good non-fiction books out there. There's encyclopedias, which I know not a lot of people sit around and read encyclopedias for fun, but you could learn a lot. There's textbooks, which a lot of times you have to read for classes, like for college or for specialized degrees and things. Don't mind me with this noise back here. I'm just messing around with a robot. And there's autobiographies and biographies and things like that, books about people and their lives and real events. I don't read a lot of those because I feel like some of those are really self-absorbed. And I don't want to say that everybody who writes an autobiography is like that, but sometimes you get a bit of a biased perspective from people who write those kind of things. Like I have the Marilyn Manson autobiography, which he wrote with the help of somebody else, Neil Strauss. They together did the book, and there was certainly some liberties taken in the stories there, I think, because it was designed to reinforce the character of Marilyn Manson rather than the person behind all the shenanigans and things at the time. And I read Tim Allen's autobiography, which was called "Don't Stand Too Close to a Naked Man." That one's a bit grown up. So if you got younger people in the audience, I'm not going to talk about that. My daughter listens to these podcasts after the fact, so I can't really talk about too much of what was in that book. But he does talk about cars, and he talks about tools, and he talks about his time getting on his show and things he had at the time. This was when he was on Home Improvement back in the day, back in the late 90s, 2000s. So, yeah, so I've read a couple of autobiographies. We have a couple other ones in my house here. We have Eddie Izzard's autobiography. I haven't read it yet, but we have it. What else? But there's all kinds of, and there's art books too. There's art books, which are like grown-up picture books. As a very young kid, most of the books you get, they're big on pictures and short on words, because they're getting you used to like opening the book and flipping pages and things like that. And also you're not, when you're really young, you can't really read yet, so you rely on a grown-up or an older person an older child, if you have an older sibling, to read these books to you. But mostly you're looking at the pictures, right? So as an adult, we have coffee table books. And I don't know how too many people who still have coffee tables anymore. Maybe it's still a thing, maybe it isn't. I don't know. I don't know much about modern room layouts so much anymore. I don't know if people still do coffee tables, but if you do, they've got coffee table books, which is big, giant books, like 2 feet by 2 feet large, and you open them, they're big, they're pictures. Like I have one that's about Corvettes. It's a Corvette coffee table book. It's all about the history of Corvettes and things, and there's little descriptions of things, but mostly it's pictures. It's pictures of the evolution of the car from then to now, or the now of when the book was written. And people get those. People get coffee table books that are like famous art, or they're based off of an artist's work or things like that, and you flip through. Sometimes you get them, like sometimes celebrities and musicians will do these big books, and they'll show things from behind the scenes of their movies, or sneak peeks at what their life is like outside of Hollywood, and things like that. And that's kind of interesting sometimes. A lot of times, though, it can be kind of self-indulgent too, like the autobiographies, right? Then you get into cookbooks. Cookbooks are fun. Because I never have all the ingredients I need to make any recipe out of a cookbook. I always have to go get something. And I guess that's the thing about it. It makes you get up and go do things and move around. But I do like making things sometimes from these cookbooks. I'm not always very good at following recipes, but I do like to make things from cookbooks. I have a cookbook about that's about English and Scottish UK recipes basically, because I'm a fan of UK food. I like pies. I like the meat pies and things, and the full English full breakfast and Yorkshire puddings and things like that, which is not really, when they say pudding, they don't mean pudding like, Jello pudding, you stir it up, good. It's more, a pudding for them is like a savory dish, almost like a big bread thing, or like a sausage. Sausages are puddings, like haggis, Scottish haggis. And I'm not going to get into what that is, so if you don't know what it is, you're going to be a little confused. But if you do, then you'll understand. They call it the Queen of Puddings, or the King of Puddings, or something like that. I don't remember what it is. and it's not, it's not what we would think of in the United States as pudding, but that's what it is. So cookbooks, I have one of those. We also have a cookbook by Mr. James May, who's not known for his cooking. He's known for driving around at varying speeds. But we do have his cookbook. We also have Danny Trejo's taco cookbook. He does tacos. He's got a taco restaurant or a taco stand or something in I think it's in Los Angeles. And he developed all the recipes himself, like from when he was growing up with his family and things like that. So we have his cookbook. So cookbooks are neat. And you guys know, if you guys know from my other shows, like my Saturday show and my time with This Uncanny Earth, you guys know I also get into different, like, alternative spirituality kind of things. So I have a lot of esoteric, I guess you could call it. I have books about spell casting and things, which I don't really do too much of that because, I don't know, a lot of those are written by people who kind of get a bit dramatic. They go a bit over the top, and they're like, you have to call the demons and this and that, and I'm kind of like, I don't really need to do that. I don't need to do that. I'm kind of skeptical about a lot of that kind of stuff anyway, but I like to read about it. I do like to read about it. So I've got books about that. And I also have books about, like, theory and about guessing and things like that. And that sounds like a weird topic, but bear with me here. I have books about ancient astronaut theory, which I'm super into, and I'm not going to get into too deeply here, of course, but it's about how, possibly alien beings started our civilization back in ancient days and things like that. And whether or not that's true is anybody's guess. I'm not trying to convert anybody to any line of thought or trying to say, like, it's totally true, read this book, but buy my iodine pills, I don't know, colloidal silver. But I do like to read about people's thoughts about that kind of thing because I think it's a fascinating theory, and I like the history stuff. I like the guesswork. And I have a few actual history books that are just like Egyptian history and things like that too, which is great as well. But let's circle back to fiction. I like the books I read mostly in the fiction are sci-fi, fantasy novels, and some thrillers, and then a few like off the wall kind of just weird things that are in there that don't fit in these genres, or if they do so only barely, just because of certain parts of the content. Like I have a lot of books that are like space opera kind of books where you're got a crew on a ship and they go have adventures and fight aliens and monsters and things, and there's big galaxy wide trouble and stuff. I have a bunch of things like that. I get into some of the books I like. I'm going to mention Terry Brooks is an author that I like. I think Terry Brooks is his name. And he wrote the Shannara books. So if you know what that is, then you know. If you don't, then go ahead and look them up. And I thought it was a nice twist. That what he did was he wrote these books that were like fantasy novels that dealt with magic and elves and monsters and things. But then he went later on and he wrote modern day books about this girl who fought like demons and things, and she could see him and her friends couldn't see him and things like that. And then he tied that into an apocalyptic future that ended up being the past of his fantasy novels. And the reason that everything was all like medieval and things was because of all these things that happened in the past. Like our world was in the past and their world was the future, and they didn't have any technology, they didn't have anything there. They had magic and whatnot, and it was after nuclear devastation, which I thought was interesting. I thought it was really super interesting. That's a tack that they have continued in different things that were not written by this author. There's a cartoon that I've never actually seen, but I've read about it, called Adventure Time. And the premise for that was that there was this big war in the past, and there was this bomb that was dropped that was basically the equivalent of like a nuclear bomb. And it mutated things and caused magic and did all these other things, and now their future is like a semi-medieval, kind of thing. So it's not a concept that's unheard of. So I like that. My favorite book of all time is a book called American Gods, and it's by an author named Neil Gaiman. And he is my favorite author for the most part, because I like his writing style, I like his characters, and American Gods is a book that goes so many different directions, you really don't know how it's going to go until the end. And it changed my perspective on a lot of things about life, and even though it's a fiction novel, it gave me a new outlook on things. It challenged me. It made me think about things differently, and that's why I like it so much. I can't get over it. They made a TV show based off of the book on Starz, and then they put it on some other network afterwards, and it wasn't as good. It started out okay, then it picked up, went down, picked up, and then it just went completely off the rails, and they added way too much that wasn't in the book. And while some of that might be interesting and might be neat to flesh things out, it went in some directions that really didn't have the same tone. At least in my opinion. I didn't care for the tone that it was going for, so I ended up not watching it, and then it ended up getting not renewed after like the third season, so it was done. I'm reading my daughter at bedtime. At bedtimes, I'm reading a little few pages at a time. I'm reading the book Stardust, which is by Neil Gaiman, and it's a fantasy adventure novel. And there's some questionable things in the book that aren't for children, but I've been kind of skipping over those. And when she's a little older, she can go back and read those herself. But she's digging it, and it was a good book. But the movie based on it was really good. It was a lot simpler. They cut out a bunch, as they do with movies, but it was well done. It was very well done. And it had Robert De Niro. It had who was it? Was either Michelle Pfeiffer or Kim Basinger. I think it was Michelle Pfeiffer, maybe. And some other people that might be kind of big names. Mark Strong was in it. And it was great. It was a great movie. I have it on DVD around here somewhere because that was before Blu-rays got really big. And I've seen it in theaters. I saw it in theaters twice. It was such a good movie. It was an excellent movie. And now, speaking of my daughter, she has one of his books also. It's a children's book, specifically a children's book, called Cinnamon, about a girl and a tiger, and that's a good recommended book as well. He's written a few other children's books that I don't have. I also have Coraline, which is like a stop-motion claymation kind of thing that's based off of a story that he wrote. I believe it's a small book, but I don't have the actual book. I have like a graphic novel version of it, but I don't have the actual book. But I have the DVD and I have the graphic novel, and that's really good. And you can watch that. That's a great one as well, if you're into that kind of stuff. And he has a lot of other things too. He has books of short stories. He has a book retelling the Norse myths, like the stories of Thor and Loki and Odin and things, which are different from what you may have seen on Marvel movies and things of that nature. And so he does his own retelling of those stories while still staying pretty faithful to the original. And that was pretty good. It's called, pretty simply enough, Norse mythology. And so you should check that out if you're into that kind of thing. It's very good as well. Very good. But yeah, so I'm reading that. My daughter has the first Harry Potter book, which I was never really interested in. Anytime I'm kind of a real grouchy, anti-establishment kind of, grouchy dude. Anytime something gets really huge and popular, I avoid it. I don't like it. I don't like super huge popular things because I tend to think that the majority is not always right, and if the majority likes something, then there's a good chance that I won't. Which is not true in every single case, but it's kind of a bias that I have, which is unfortunate. It's probably a character flaw. But, oh well, it's just how I am. So I've never read them. I've seen a couple parts from some of the movies, and I've seen the first movie. And we watched Fantastic Beasts recently. And we also have the Hogwarts game, so I guess, I'm kind of into that a little bit. But I've never really read the books. But she's got the first one, and she's reading that. She has all kinds of books of her own now. And she reads great. She's a great reader. She's an excellent reader. She reads at a level like several years ahead where a lot of kids in this town are reading at. By all impressions, I've taken a look at what the local school kids are getting into, and she's pretty far beyond them as far as her reading skills. Not to toot some horns and be like, "Hey, look at this," but just as a statement of fact, that's just how it is. I'm sure there are plenty of kids around here that I just don't know about that are reading very well as well. I don't want to put down anybody else's kids. I'm not propping mine up at the expense of anybody else's. I'm just saying. But we read The Hobbit as her first big, epic book at bedtime. And then she read through a good chunk of it herself, which is pretty hefty reading for an 8-year-old. We read that when she was 7, actually. So, it's Tolkien is pretty rough for a young kid. But she got through it, and she liked parts about it. She was a big fan of the dwarves visiting Bilbo at the beginning and messing up his house and then cleaning everything up for him. So books. What else do I got? I also do. I'm getting kind of far afield with this one, but that's okay because books are so many different areas. I do tabletop role playing and things like pencil and paper, Dungeons and Dragons kind of stuff, and so I have a lot of books like that. I have Dungeons and Dragons source books. I have Transforming Robots source books. I have Vampire, Werewolf, etc. source books that tell you rules and backgrounds and histories and all kinds of things. And I find that kind of stuff really fascinating too. So I have a bunch of those. I've only played probably half of those games of the books that I have, but I'm still fascinated at the histories and the settings and that kind of stuff. And I like to read about them. I just like to read about them. And I don't read nearly as much as I should anymore. I find I just don't have... I don't have the attention span, I guess, to just sit down and read so much more. I do so much other stuff in a day that by the time I get a chance to sit and do something, I just want to turn on the Xbox and play something and kind of melt my brain out a little bit because I'm so busy during the day. I do stuff for this Uncanny Earth and the podcast and my other videos. I take care of my daughter. I take care of the house and the pets and things. And the dog, of course, needs 24/7 because she's elderly and she's got issues, so she needs to be paid attention to all the time. So when I'm just here, I got to take care of all this stuff. So it's all right. I'm not complaining. I just don't get as much time to read as I want to. And I could make time to read if I really sat down and thought about it. You can always make time to read. It's not like a half hour out of your day reading a few pages is going to hurt, So I'm probably just not motivating myself enough, which again is another character flaw. You guys are hearing all about my character flaws. But yeah, books. Now, there's some people, and I've never really been a part of this kind of thing. I've looked at it from a distance, but I've never actually been a part of this whole scene. And I don't know how many people still do this anymore, but there's book clubs where people like get together, they talk about books that they read, and they pick like a book for everybody to read, and then they come back and they discuss plot points about it and ins and outs and talk about characters and things like that. And I've never really been a part of that. In school, we had to do critical thinking exercises about books in literature class. And a lot of times the books they would want us to read, I don't know, I wasn't into the school books so much. We had to read Animal Farm. And I know it's an allegory, I know it's supposed to be symbolic about all this kind of stuff, but I didn't like it. It was a terrible book to me. Not to say that it's a terrible book, because it's all subjective, that's all, personal opinion. But I didn't like it. And then there was Lord of the Flies, about the kids that get stuck on the island. And my teacher, she tried. She was always like, "What's the symbolism of this part of the story?" And I was always like, "There isn't any. It's this. It's just flat out. It means what you read, and that's it." She's like, "No, it symbolizes this, and it could mean this." And I'm like, "No, I'm so frustrated. It doesn't mean any of those things." And maybe I was right, and maybe I was wrong. Everybody reads books differently. And some books have symbolism that I can get behind, and some of them just they don't. I don't get the message, or the message seems like, what's the point? But yeah, school. I always had trouble with the books in school, and we read some kind of difficult books for kids. Like we read The Giver, which is about nobody having color and things like that. We had. And like the emotions were dulled down. We read I Am the Cheese, which is about that kid from in the hospital. I know this is really vague, so if you haven't heard of any of these, you're kind of like, what? What are you talking about? Just look up the titles. Look up the titles. The Giver, I Am the Cheese. It sounds like a silly book, but it's allegory. Yeah, we read a lot of that kind of stuff, and I had some trouble with it. I had trouble with it as a kid, which is why I was reading Jurassic Park and things like that, and Shannara books and stuff like that. So yeah, books. What are your favorite books? What do you guys like to read? I mean, it doesn't have to be like regular books. You can read comic books too. Comic books are cool. I might do an episode on comics, because that's a pretty wide-ranging field as well, comics. But yeah, what are you reading? Let me know. Like, comment on this on YouTube or wherever, or just hit me up on Facebook on my Facebook page, Spider Does Things. I'm on Facebook, and I will respond to comments. I definitely will. Just let me know. Tell me what you're reading. Tell me what you like to read. Tell me what you hate to read. Tell me what's kind of like, this was the worst book I've ever read. This book was great. This book challenged me and things. Just tell me about it. I'd love to hear it. I'd love to get recommendations for books too. I've recommended American Gods to almost every single person that I know who's into reading. And in almost every case, they came back and they were like, "Man, that book was so good. Like, I wasn't sure about it, but man, that book was so good." And I'm like, it is, isn't it? It's great. It's fantastic. It's a grown-up book, so it's not for your kids. Not yet. Let your kids grow up a little bit. It's definitely a grown-up book. A lot of grown-up stuff happens in that book, but it's worth it. It's an excellent book. Excellent book. And yeah, books. I like books. You should like books too. Some people don't. There are a lot of people out there that are just like, I don't read. I can read, but I don't. And I respect that. I respect that people just, some people's imaginations are different. Some people just can't get into that. Some people maybe have reading difficulties, so they don't like it because they have problems reading. And that's fine too, I don't mind. I'm not going to yell at you. But if you can, and you're interested, then read more. Read more. I should read more. I should read a lot more. I think it'd be good for people to do more reading. And maybe some writing, too, if you want to. You can always write a book. If you got an idea for a book, go ahead. Give it a try. Worst that can happen is somebody can say, no, I don't want to publish that. And then you can publish it yourself. You can self-publish these days. If you're doing more than one copy at a time, then yeah, it can get pretty expensive. But you can do your own. You can print out all your own materials. You can type it all up. You can put it on the internet. You can have it be an ebook. Ebooks are a thing. You can stick it to Amazon, and Amazon will let people put it on their Kindles and whatnot. Digital books. Digital books are huge right now. Audiobooks, if you got a great voice for characters and things, you can do audiobooks. Yeah, I wrote a couple things. I wrote what could be considered a book. A lot of people would call it transforming robot fan fiction, I guess is what it is. But I put a lot of effort into it, and I've been trying to edit it down and get it to where it's, it's clean and easy to read, and I might do more. I'm getting old though, so we'll see. But yeah, that's all I got. Because the dog over here is getting antsy, so she's gonna need something soon, and the cats are trying to attack me, so they're gonna need something soon, of course. And yeah, next week's episode, I think might be. I got a suggestion from Amanda K. That's the right one. I said Amanda J last time when we were talking about Muppets, because she had the suggestion for Muppets. But it's not Amanda J, it's Amanda K. Amanda K. Alright? Amanda K. So, she suggested superstitions. And I may get into that next week. Or I might do something else. I don't know. I might just jump into comics, because that's like a companion to this one. But that'll be on deck for a future episode anyway. I will be doing superstitions at one point, because there's so many of them, and some of them are really, really fascinating, and some of them are silly, and some of them are frightening, and they're all over the place. So, superstitions. But what else is going on this week? Tomorrow, of course, is Tuesday as of this recording, so I'll be doing Twitch streaming, DMGRGN, Twitch streaming, and Wednesday, I'll be testing out some new, I don't think it's new technology, but it's some new apps for streaming content that I'm trying to work on, and to work around my laptop being kind of a pain. The laptop is fine for this, like it doesn't give me any problems, but when I'm doing video stuff, it seems to be wanting to shut itself off at the most inopportune moments. So I'm going to be testing some things, so keep an eye out for that on my various platforms. And then Thursday, of course, there's another episode of the Uncanny Spirits Club. Friday, another episode of This Uncanny Earth. And Saturday, another episode of the Saturday Spiritualist. So it's a full week as per usual. If you ever want to toss a buck or two towards expenses, I do pay monthly for the Spreaker thing, and for the StreamYard, which is what we use for this Uncanny Earth and everything else, and whatnot. Then you can send it to paypal.me/SpiderInTheHall. Okay, because I used to use it for my band, and I don't do band stuff anymore. I'm not. I kind of shut down most of my music making. But yeah, it's, and I'm not gonna go around begging, like being like, "Hey, you should donate to my stuff because blah blah blah." I'm not into that. If you want to toss a buck or two because you like the content, that's up to you. PayPal.me/SpiderInTheHall. If you want to. If you want to pay for a sandwich or something for me for the next week. Whatever. I'm not going to have you guys try to pay for an $80,000 RV or something like that. Like some other people I know of. So yeah, it's there if you want to, and if you don't want to, you don't have to. Whoop-de-doo, I'm not going to be upset. There's no special bonus or privileges or anything else. I used to have a Patreon, and I don't really do much with it anymore. It didn't really work out very well. You got to have an influx of money coming in to be able to turn around into things to give people, and I couldn't work that out. So rather than keep taking people's money for no reason, I was just like, nah, I'll just stop. So yeah, so it's there if you want. If you want to toss a buck or two towards expenses. If not, I don't care. It's not a big deal. I'm not going to cry about it. I'm not going to come knock on your door and be like, why didn't you pay me for my podcast? I'm not going to do that. It's not that big of a deal. We all got bills to pay. We all got things to pay for. It's fine. It's cool. It's cool. I get it. So that's all. Tune in next week, like I said. And I suppose I will see you then. Have a good one.